Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Create or Die. This is your host, Ike Allred. And we're going to do it again. I think last time the episode didn't turn out half bad and got some good feedback. We got personal, we got raw. And that's what we're going to do again today. This time, I'm going to learn you something. I'm going to learn you something real good. Something that I wish I would have known when I first started out. And that's how to scope a project. How important it is to define those expectations up front. So before you get in it with a client or your boss or a collaborator or whatever, you got to make sure you've established what success looks like and what's included in the price. So if that's something that you're interested in, maybe you've struggled with that, this is my way, and it served me pretty well. So let's do this. All right, like I said, it's all about setting those expectations up front and being fair to yourself. Now, back in the day when I first made my foray into commercial art, if you will, getting paid for creating art, design, whatever, I made some pretty big mistakes, some pretty costly mistakes. And they weren't just costly in terms of dollars lost, costly in terms of sanity and well-being. So, sounds kind of dark, but why don't I just kind of give you a little bit of background. So I was working a blue-collar job, was actually at a silver refinery, and lots of gross smoke and hazards. I have burns on my hands where hot slag fell into my glove, and you try to get it out. It was not what I wanted to do for my whole life. But my father and a couple of my uncles worked there, and it paid well enough to feed a family and provide decent medical benefits and what have you. So kind of the Utah equivalent of working in a mine, I guess. I can imagine those people out in, I don't even know, Tennessee, Kentucky, working the mines, the coal mines, and just one generation after another, and you just did what you had to do because you were the breadwinner. You were expected to provide, right? And I started my family relatively young. I was married at 22, had my first child at 23, got in a car accident while I was doing college and full-time working graveyard, I think at the time, or I don't know. It was a crazy schedule, and it was a wake-up call that I was doing too much. So eventually I settled into this blue-collar job. Been there for a couple of years, but I knew deep down that I was just dying inside. I dreaded Monday. I hated going to work. My wife had to wake me up at 4 a.m. because I couldn't be relied on to wake up on my own because I didn't want to get up for this job. So it was not fun. And so I decided one day, I've got a little bit of schooling. It was in animation. I'd gone to the local community college, for 3 to 4 years off and on, just kind of learning different programs, changing my major, if you can even call it that, at the associate level. And I knew that the only way to make money as an artist, seemed like the only way was to become a graphic designer. That's what everybody did, right? And so, I had a contact that reached out to me to create a Flash website for their RC hobbies products that they produced, and having an animation background, creating that in Flash, creating complex animations for the navigation. It was fun, and I charged like $500 for it because I think that was their budget. They were basically like, "Can you build us a site for $500?" And I was like, "Yeah." That sounded like a lot of money at the time, and I probably put at least 100 hours into the thing, so $5 an hour, which wasn't even minimum wage back in 2004 when I did that. But it was a step in the right direction, and they were easy to work with, and we got it done, and at least it was $5 an hour. Could have been worse. And so with that project under my belt, I thought, if I could get 2 or 3 of those a month, I could probably make ends meet, and get 4 or 5, and we'd be doing just fine based on what I was making at the time. And so I decided to go all in. I cashed in my 401k and took the hit on taxes. So I don't know, it's probably $10,000, and then with taxes, I net 5 or 6,000, whatever. So it wasn't a whole lot of money to basically live on and start a business with, but hey, I was determined and I was going to make it work. So here we are, end of 2004. Got some office space because I was just living in a small apartment at the time, 2-bedroom apartment, and didn't really, envision. We didn't have the technology to say, hey, this can be a workplace. If it was all online, then yeah, maybe we could have made it work. But I envisioned people coming in and into the studio or whatever. So, anyways, that's what we did. What I did. My dad and an uncle were kind of silent partners, and wasn't anything official. I put in all the money. They had some ideas, and my uncle would help kind of answer questions with regards to HTML, and I was doing stuff in Flash, but I needed it to live on an HTML page, so just kind of getting that working. So anyways, tangents galore. Yeah, that's what I'm known for. So picture this, end of 2004, I'm meeting other businesses in the office complex, start to put the word out. I think I went around to local businesses nearby, got some referrals, and one of the first big projects was to do this website for a real estate company. And I remember initially thinking, based on my first project, $500 for a website, maybe if I could tell people like $100 a page, that sounded pretty good. And so that's what I told this guy. and I think he wanted 8 to 10 pages, so it was like, yeah, $100 a page, $800,000. I think we settled at 8 pages, and he was in no hurry. He was like, okay, yeah, appreciate that. Let me think on it and talk it over with business partners, his wife, whatever. And I was like, okay, great. And then, I don't know, days, a week, 2 weeks went by, and I was starting to get desperate because things weren't happening. I was spending money, but very little was coming in. I was working on my own Flash website and a logo and trying to get internet working in the space and all the things that come with starting your own business. And money was running out, and I was getting worried about paying rent and having groceries and whatever. So I reached back out to this guy and I said, I think I had a big bill due or something. I was like, hey, if you pull the trigger on that today, you can get me a check today. I'll do it for $400. So we're talking $50 a page, and that was my scope. There was no details in there as far as how many hours, how much text, how long the page could be, whether or not it included stock photography, stock illustrations, or custom illustrations, or animations, or video. It was just wide open. And you just kind of hope that people will kind of respect the fact that there's only, I don't know, the money can only stretch so far, right? Well, that wasn't the case with this guy. I remember knocking out those first initial pages fairly quick and showing it to him. He liked the look and feel. Things seemed to be going well. And then he just kept coming back with more additions. Like, what if we did this little animation that said sign up for this newsletter, and it would be this little flash element, and the user rolls, mouses over it, and it does this. And I was like, okay, great, yeah, we'll do that. Let's do it. And I'd do it, and it would take me, 4-6 hours just to do that one element. And so, boom, there went a ton of time. And that was after I'd already put in a week or two's worth of work on this thing. So it was the project that just would not die. And he would keep adding more links. It was like he was trying to get me to reproduce the entire MLS on this on this site. Here's this page, and I had to learn how to integrate the MLS listings. It was a ton of work for $400. And then I remember him coming to me and saying, hey, I'd like an image or a photo of a person that does this. And so, I tried looking for free resources, and there weren't really any back then besides taking something off of Google, which I wasn't about to do. So I did remember finally saying, okay, if I'm going to buy some more stock photography, because I think I'd already spent $100 or $150 on some stock, and out of this $400 zero budget, basically. And I just didn't know how to ever make it stop. And anyways, I got a little bit of money for the stock photos, and finally convinced them to launch it. But there was no, hey, once it's live, it's done, or there was just no end to it. So he would continue to call me up, and it wasn't just like, hey, here's something you could do. Could you please knock that out real quick? It was like, come to my office and let's meet, and I'll explain what I want done for like 30 minutes or an hour. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to have a panic attack just thinking about it. And I think one day I literally said, I only charged you this amount and I've spent this much. I've literally made zero. I realized that, I may burn a bridge here, but I can't do any more work on this for what's been paid. And I think he realized that, he's gotten an amazing deal. Now, granted, this stuff was not that good because I was just starting out and hacking my way through things. But suffice it to say, it was painful and wasted a lot of time that I could have been spending on building my brand or doing business development or working on other projects or spending time with my family or just not stressing, appreciating what it would have been like to be 25. That was a few years ago. So, man, painful. But this is raw. This is Create or Die raw. We're coming at you with the real stories. So that's one example of what it looked like to somebody, who didn't know what they were doing when it comes to scoping a project. And you begin to resent that client. You don't want anything to do with them. It starts to invade your dreams. You have nightmares about it. And it was all because I didn't know how to set those expectations out of the gate. I had no experience from others who had done this professionally, really. I rubbed shoulders with a handful of freelancers, but I don't think they were much better off. They lucked out and maybe had a family member who fed them a lot of work, and that kept them afloat, and it was just, So what happened next? Well, eventually after, having a few pretty rough experiences, including one or two clients that never even paid me, after making probably $3,000 or $4,000 in a 8 to 10 month period, I just couldn't do the freelance thing anymore. I had to find something else, and it was time to go back to work. And certainly didn't want to go. Well, I didn't even have the option to go back to that blue collar job that I had walked away from. So it was about finding something else. And here I felt like I had failed and didn't know what to do. But thankfully I decided, you know what? I'm gonna give it my all and see if I can't land a job at a design firm. I've got some portfolio stuff that I've put together in these past 8 to 10 months of struggling and hacking my way through stuff. And I had a website that was for my business, but I didn't think of it as like a portfolio website. So I probably told this story before on this podcast, but I told my wife, hey, I'm gonna go to the office and I'm not coming back until I have a portfolio website and a resume put together so that I can apply for a design job, because we need something consistent coming in. And this was after me getting certification to become a loan officer that a fellow tenant of the building I was in, paid for me to go through some training so that I could work for him. And so yeah, forget about even that. It was time to do what I loved and actually get paid enough to provide for my family. Because up to this point, I was not providing for my family. We were on welfare for a lot of that period, welfare from our church, and it was extremely humbling. And it did give me a lot of empathy for others who find themselves in that situation. So as painful as it was, I'm thankful for it, the experience, and now I can empathize with those that are facing that. And people have had it a lot worse than me, no question. But so I mustered up the strength and resolve to put together a portfolio website and apply for a job. And back then, most jobs were still found in the want ads in a physical printed paper. So I remember going through there and I found one, at least, that I was able to apply for that day, and because I wanted to get something out there. So I submitted it to the email they put in the ad and went to sleep at probably 9 or 10 a.m. that next morning after staying up all night. And then I was awoken by my wife at 5 or 6 p.m. saying, "Hey, there's a phone call for you." And it happened to be the office manager of this place that I had applied to. And, talked to her for a minute, did my best not to sound like I had just woken up. And she asked if I could come in for an interview the next day. And my hunger was so great that I just slayed that interview. I was cracking jokes. I was, Johnny on the spot. And, personally, I give credit to God for helping me out in that time of need, as he knew that, I had the desire to provide for my little family of 2 kids and a wife, so a family of 4. And thankfully I got that job. And I think they were happy to hear that my asking wage was $12 an hour, which was what I figured was the bare minimum for me to be able to pay my bills and provide for the family at that time. And I think, that was about half what anyone else was asking. So that, combined with my hunger, literal hunger, I got the job. And here I am telling this long story when you came here to learn about how to scope a project. Well, this is all important in that process, because you got to feel the pain first, right? To understand the importance and why one might want to really scope things out and have it in writing so you have something to point to, right? So I learned this skill not because I Googled it and learned on my own, but instead this design firm that I worked at, I got to observe them and their process and what they went through to scope out a project. And I remember hearing that they were charging $10,000-$20,000 for a website similar to what I had a few months prior charged $400 or $500 for. So that sounded just amazing. How could you begin to charge those kind of hours, those kind of numbers. And that's the key, the hours. So you want to decide, what is my hourly rate? And that depends on what others are charging with your skill set and in your area and for the kind of work that you want to do. If you're a beginner and you're trying to charge the rates of a full-fledged studio, you may get a job or two, but you're pretty unlikely to be able to maintain that, because you're just not going to have the skill set or the speed to really provide value at that rate. So, this isn't necessarily an episode about how to figure out what your rate is. There's a lot of good tutorials out there. I would recommend Chris Doe on YouTube, The Future, without an E, Future. And he does a great job at hashing it out and how to break down what you should be charging per hour based on your expenses and all that. So, but once you've determined what your hourly rate is, whether you're scoping a project for, a fixed price, or you're giving them a general estimate with a number of hours associated with that, so that they know, hey, if we hit this number of hours, that's how much it's going to be. If we go 10, 20 hours over, well, the hourly rate and you can figure it out, right? So yeah, once you have that hourly rate, then it's a process of, and this is easier the more you've done this kind of work, but you think in your head like, okay, what's the process? And this is how I do it. I'm sure there are better ways, but I take out a Google Docs document and I start an outline, and it's like, okay, kickoff, right? Initial kickoff meeting, whether that's over Zoom or it's in person, and assign a number of hours to that. So if you've got to drive there and you're going to be there, the round trip time there, let's say it's 3 hours. There you go. Okay, that's kickoff. And then what happens next? You go back and maybe let's just say it's a website project. And so the first step is to come up with some wireframes, because you've said, okay, we're going to deliver 4 different templates. There's going to be a homepage template. There's going to be a landing page template. There's going to be a general content page and maybe a contact page. Oversimplifying this, it could be more. But yeah, try to determine the number of templates. And because a lot of contemporary websites are templatized, you're using some type of framework, CMS, and then you put it in the client's hands to populate that based on these initial templates. So if you did one section, here's the products page, and there's 4 different products, I've given you the landing page for the product page and then a detail page for one of the products, and you can duplicate those. So lay out, hey, here are my templates. And then you say, okay, how long is it going to take me to wireframe the homepage template? Okay, that might be 2 hours. And then there's going to be a round of revisions, or you want to get that in front of the client so that they can say, yeah, you've captured all of the requirements for this page and we're going to sign off on that. Or you've allowed for 1-2 rounds of revisions for them to say, let's try it with moving this section below here and this, you do those. So you're assigning hours to all of these different steps. And then once you've finished the entire scope, you've gone through and you've added a a block of hours for each of these templates. And this may just be, and you might be scoping out just design or design and development. Now, don't scope out development if you don't know how to do it or you don't have a developer on the hook to produce that for you. So let's just pretend this is design only, okay? And then they've got their developers that are going to execute on it. So we're delivering, Figma files, templates, their developers can then pull the assets from, build the pages. Nice thing about Figma and Sketch is it gives the developers a lot of the info on the CSS and different code elements to make all that clear, and usually negate the need for a style guide. But if they're asking for that, or if you want to upsell them, and make sure you scope it in there. So again, oversimplification. If you want to learn more about this and you want me to create a visual tutorial, let me know. Leave a comment, leave a voice note through Spotify, whatever. Just get the word out and we'll do this. But again, once you've come up with your number of hours of how long you think it'll take you, and you want to round up slightly, if you're like, yeah, that thing's going to take me 3.8 hours, call it 4, okay? That's all right. And usually every step should be at least 1 hour, because there is going to be some admin stuff. There's the opening, starting up the computer, opening up the applications, getting your mind wrapped around what it is you're doing, and then you're doing the work. It might seem like, hey, it's just this one little thing, it'll take me 15 minutes, but with all of those things combined, it's probably an hour. And so if there's multiple things that are similar, then you group those up together and you can, have some cost savings. Like, let's say we know we're going to create 10 icons. Well, rather than getting in and out of the program and doing something else and having to charge, an hour for each one of those icons, we know up front. And so it might be a couple hours for sketch concepts, and then some revisions might be an hour, and then 2 or 3 hours for vectorizing those icons. So we're talking more like 5 or 6 hours rather than 10 hours. But that's just an example. It's up to you. And you don't necessarily want to get penalized for being faster, just because it might take you 15 minutes. The value of it may be an hour's worth. So there's some subjectivity there where you have to decide how to charge. But let's say we're just saying we're scoping it out by the hours, and we've decided that the entire project is going to be 35 hours. And just to make it simple, let's say your hourly rate is $100. So that's $3,500. Now, this is the estimate, assuming everything goes perfectly. So this is where you look at your client and you're like, have I worked with these people before? Is it pretty straightforward that they're going to not be overly picky and come back at me again and again? Because if it's a fixed bid, then you want to make sure that you've accounted for everything. So let's say this is a new client, and you know that, they're a good sized business. It's not just like an individual, and so you're not necessarily just competing on price. You want to be able to provide them good service. And just like my example from earlier, where the client got an amazing price at only $400 for probably 400 hours worth of work. In the end, I wasn't able to serve them as well as I could have because I was constantly just dreading every second of working on that project. So you want to make sure it's mutually beneficial. And if your experience and the person or company you're working with balks at your price, then just, hey, that's what it is, and totally I understand if we're not a good fit. There's definitely others out there who may be able to do it for less money. And leave it at that. And go your separate ways and count your blessings that you didn't get locked in with a client that doesn't value what it is you do. Because that is definitely the case. Point them to Fiverr. That's where you can find those designers that maybe can do it for a lot cheaper. So we're back at this website estimate for design. It came out to 35 hours, $3,500, just based on the hours. But then this is the first time you've worked with this client. They're a bigger client. You know that there's probably some things that they're not asking for, but there's some surprises that could come up. And so rather than just saying, okay, it's 35 hours, $3,500, a lot of times I'll add in some buffer for some unexpected things, because when it's a first client, you don't necessarily want to nickel and dime them on everything or have to slow down the progress of the website just because they're asking for a third revision and you only technically accounted for 2. This way you can look like the good guy, because yeah, sure, in our written proposal it says 2, but you're able to say, hey, don't worry about it, I'll do one more revision on this because I'm positive that we're going to nail it down and I want you to be happy. But you've protected yourself because you've built in a little bit of buffer. And how much that buffer should be, I don't know. I would probably in most cases say 20 to 30% of a buffer. So if in that case, 35 hours, 10% would be 3.5, so 7 more hours. Okay, so now we're looking at $4,200. And if it's a big company, 3,500, 4,200, it sounds about the same to them. They're good. And if they're not, then again, count your blessings and move along, right? Because more opportunities will come. So there you go. That's it. And so that could be the end of it. Send it off. They say yes, great. If they say no, okay, that's fine. Or they come back to you and say, is there any way my budget's $2,000. Can you do it for $2,000? That's when, depending on how bad you need that $2,000, you've got a few choices here, a couple choices. You can say, I wouldn't recommend saying, you know what, yeah, I believe in your cause, I'm going to give you this $4,000 site for $2,000. That's just not good. Now you've set the expectation for this client that that your prices aren't real, or that they can, dicker with the price. And that's not good. So instead you can say, okay, well, if $2,000 is your budget, let me go back and look at what we can do, what an MVP might look like. Like you're asking for 4 templates, I can do 2 templates. So maybe we can take this, instead of having a homepage template and a landing page template, we combine those into a landing page template, and you can use it for the homepage and your landing pages. And instead of a content page template and a contact page template, combine those into one template. So now we're down to 2 templates, and the math works out. And look at this, we're at about 2,000. So that's what I can do for you. And then that way, they can see that, oh, okay, this person can work with me, but they're giving me less because I'm paying them less. That's a great solution. But you may be like, hey, I don't get out of bed for less than $4,000 on a project, so I'm gonna have to pass. You do you. But regardless, you want to be professional and cool about it. So that's one option. Another option might be that, hey, let's do this in phases. Okay, you've got 2,000 right now. I can do wireframes, or we can cut out some revisions if you're sure that you can, be good at describing what it is you want. And I'm not really describing a phase process, but you could say, okay, you've got 2,000 now. We'll do the wireframe stages on all of these. A lot of developers can produce something from wireframes, and you can kind of prototype that. And then when you've got buy-off from your stakeholders or whatever, or VC funded or whatever, you can come back and pay me the other 2,000 if you're really that tight. So just a couple of examples that you don't want to compromise, because as soon as you compromise and say, okay, you know what, I like you, you're a good person, I believe in your mission, I'll give it to you half off, then you're dealing with trouble. Now, if this is a collaborator, a person that, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, like I have a working relationship with a friend and colleague of mine who his skills complement mine really well. So we'll kind of do trade work for each other. And sometimes money will be included, but it's of value for me to say, hey, I'll spend 5-10 hours on a project creating some artwork for you, because I know that down the road I can reach out to you for some hours with some programming help, or music for my podcast. That's right, Mr. Tom Cattell, I'm talking about you. Yeah, much appreciated for how well our skill set complement one another. But yeah, if that's the case, great. It's an equal trade. But if it's just a transactional thing, or client, yeah, be careful. So there you go. That's my little primer, my little what for on what goes into scoping a project, and why it's so important to do that. Because if things start to derail, you can point back to that proposal, and yeah, it's great if they sign it, and it's good if you, especially if it's a new client, get 25 to 50% up front for sure. Just be like, hey, I'll get started on this as soon as I get that check for that 25 to 50% up front, whatever you feel is the right way to go. And then they've got skin in the game, and so they're motivated to see it through, and they're not just gonna ghost you and start working with someone else, which happens, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm sure there are some other things I was gonna cover that are escaping me at the moment. But yeah, you can point to, whether it's signed or not, they've decided to move forward. You've sent them an email. It's time-stamped with what it was that you were going to give for X amount of dollars, and you can call it a fixed bid, and as long as we're generally within scope, then that's what you're going to pay. Or we can say this is an estimate, but it's hourly, it's based on this hourly rate, and if I get done earlier, then You may pay less if it takes longer and there's more hours, and you may pay more. But I like the fixed bid approach in most cases, because then you can, they know what they're going to get billed. And if things are outside of scope, they ask for something else, just shoot them an email or call. I wouldn't just call them, because you want to have some kind of paper trail. And you say, okay, that's fine. Happy to help out. That wasn't included in the scope. It's going to be some additional hours. Are you okay with that? And if they're like, yeah, sure, do whatever it takes, or yeah, can you please give me an estimate of what you think that'll take? Do that. It's worth the extra time, and it shows that you're professional and that you're keeping track of things and all that good stuff. So there you go. That's my spiel on scoping a project, and this will save you a ton of headaches, sleepless nights, balding head, excessive weight gain, cortisol levels through the roof, all that crap. Stress with your partner and strain on the relationship. Save you all that. Okay? So this here episode, what are we on? 44? Episode 44. Out of all of the previous episodes, I think you get your money's worth out of this one. Alright, so put that in your pocket. Alright, friends. Remember, tell your friends, tell your family, we got to keep this thing growing. The momentum is real, and it's growing, and it's exciting. We're helping people, and I hope you find value in this. Until next time, my friends, keep on creating. Create or die.